Elliot Colburn, Conservative MP since 2019. Last month, there was quite a moment at Prime Minister's Question Time when you stood up to ask a question and in which you revealed that in December 2021, so about 2.5 years ago, you tried to take your own life. Why did you make that statement in Parliament?
To be honest, I didn't make the decision really until that day that I would have done if I was lucky enough to be called. You know what it's like, it's a lottery system. We don't know if we're going to get called that day or not for sure. So I had been thinking about it for a while. I'd been very blessed in my recovery since 2021. And I just started to pick up and notice that, particularly through constituency casework and things like that, that even if people weren't bringing up mental health, it seemed to be a feature of actually quite a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So something just said, you know what, now might be a good time for you to share this experience that you've had. I felt like I was in a strong enough place to start talking about it. I hadn't said anything outside my immediate family since it happened. So something just said, you know what, I think you're in a good enough place to share your story now and hopefully start a bit of a conversation about what we might be able to do for other people about it. I didn't really know what to expect, but something just felt right that day. But you know what it's like with PMQs. You have to sort of read the room. You don't know if it's going to be the right moment for a certain topic or a certain something. So I have to admit, I did have a backup question just in case I didn't feel like it was right yet. And the PM wasn't aware of what I was going to say outside of the broad topic around suicide prevention. So I can't say that it was something that I'd been building up to for a while or planning necessarily, but something about that day felt right. And I was lucky enough to be called by the Speaker, and there I go.
Wow, that's remarkable that you weren't sure up until that last moment whether you were going to reveal it. I remember watching it and, you know, we were like, oh my gosh, that is a brave thing to do. I was with a couple of other MPs at the time. Tell me as much as you're comfortable to tell me. What led you to the point where you thought, there's no other way, I want to take my own life?
That had been building up throughout most of 2021. It began, I suppose, what you'd call quite almost low-level periods of anxiety or feeling depressed or down. I didn't think it was anything unusual outside the normal day-to-day stresses of the job, things feeling difficult or whatnot. But as the year went by, those sort of negative thoughts became more and more extreme. And I started telling myself things like, you know what, you're not wanted by other people around you. My relationships at home, my relationships at work, all started to really start to crumble. They all became really difficult. And I began isolating myself because that's what I was telling myself that other people wanted. I said to myself that they didn't want me around, and it was completely irrational now looking back. And it got worse and worse as the year went on. I had a number of death threats come through that year, which were new to me at that time, become more accustomed to them now, but at that time they were a fairly new experience for me. And all of this just fed into this awful thought cycle and culminated in a night in December where, again, I didn't wake up that morning thinking, today's the day I'm going to do it. I guess the same with asking my Prime Minister's question, really. Something happened that day where everything just snapped into place and I felt as if there's no point going on anymore. You know, there's absolutely no point. You are unwanted. No one wants to see or hear from you, and you cannot do anything right. So why waste everyone else's time and your own time? You might as well remove yourself from the equation now. And after hours of stewing on that day, I took out my notepad from my bag. I wrote a goodbye message and tried to do something really stupid. And I'm glad it didn't work, is all I can say. I'm really glad it didn't work, but I can't say that I'd been planning necessarily to do that, but I guess that day everything came at once. Everything felt like it was on me that day and did something really silly.
What happens the next day after you attempt to take your own life?
It was all a bit of a whirlwind. I was taken to hospital that night, to St Helier, which is our local A&E. I was assessed for physical damage first to check that what I had done hadn't left anything that required any more intervention. Once they were happy and once they'd looked at me, they then referred me to Springfield Hospital in South London, which is a mental health hospital, where I stayed for a while. And when I woke up the following day in Springfield, because all of this happened overnight, I was in a bit of a daze, really. I can't really describe the feeling. I was feeling silly. I was feeling guilty. Part of me was upset, I think, that I hadn't managed to do it. But another part of me had seen the pain that it had obviously inflicted on my family that had found me and felt unbelievably guilty about that. And it was not a good place. I still fear how I felt in those few days, immediately before and immediately afterwards. And I never want to feel like that again. It was scary. I never ever want to go back to that place. And so the next day was a real whirl. In fact, the next few weeks, really, as I was released from hospital and I was put on a longer term path of recovery, those early days were still quite difficult because I was still trying to process my own feelings and why I'd got so low, but also the guilt of what I had put my loved ones through and what they'd experienced too. And I still feel upset about what I put them through. I just wish that I had spoken to somebody beforehand and hadn't got to that point.
That's interesting. So if somebody, and we know how big a issue suicide is for men, I think it's the biggest killer of men under 50.
Yeah.
So it's a huge issue for those people who are watching this and who can see where the path that they're on and where it may lead. What are your words? What can you tell them? How can you help?
I always say if I had a crystal ball in that moment where I was feeling at my lowest, the thing I always wanted to know was, will everything be okay in the end? Does everything work out? And of course the answer is yes, everything does. Things have a way of working out. They really do. And nothing is ever as bad as all that. For me, the thing that I didn't do, which I think would have really helped, is start to talk to somebody, anyone. Doesn't have to be a professional, can be a friend, a loved one, a colleague, anyone. That isn't going to solve everything. Of course it's not. And of course these things do take longer. Recovery can be measured in a very long space of time. It can take a very long time for people. And some people may always need, for the rest of their life, some kind of help, whether it be medication or therapy or counselling. Some people may have a faster recovery. But it all starts by opening up. And that's what I didn't do. And that's what I wish I had done if I'd have just spoken to someone about how I was feeling. Because looking back now, and when people tell me, you know what, I did think you were closed off during that period, I noticed a change in you, I would just wish you'd said something. Yeah, I wish I'd said something as well. It is reliant on us looking out for each other as well. Of course, it's a two-way street. But if you can find that energy and that strength to just say something to someone, I think you will feel a lot better and you will start your journey. You really will start your journey. And that's what I wish I'd done anyway.
Do you think your job, the pressures of being an MP, do you think it in any way contributed to the decision you took?
I think it would be naive not to say yes. Absolutely. The job definitely took its toll. As I said, that year, there were a number of threats that had come in, which was new to me. And whilst I've become accustomed to that now, sadly, at the time it was something that I wasn't really sure how to deal with and how to respond to. But yeah, the job definitely took its toll. It was a shame because I do love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. And you get to do and experience and meet people in a way that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to. So it's a shame that I lost sight of that at that time, because The job definitely has more good days than bad, and I love doing it. But at that time, I couldn't see the wood from the trees.
And final question, I found this chat totally mesmerising, and I'm so glad that we're able to do it because you are still here. As a result of you speaking out, you'll have had a significant response inside Parliament, outside Parliament. Is there one, perhaps two things, people, remarks, reach outs that have stuck with you that you thought, gosh, that's powerful, or I didn't expect that person to get in touch?
It was overwhelming, the response. I didn't really know what to expect, but just the overwhelming response from colleagues, from loved ones, from constituents as well was just amazing. I absolutely was blown away by it. But there was one example, actually, of a gentleman who called my office, who I wasn't there at the time. A member of my team picked up the phone, and he'd said that he was planning to take his own life that day. He'd made that decision. He'd been brought to that low point, but he'd seen that Prime Minister's question. I'm not quite sure if it popped up on his newsfeed or how, but he saw it and he decided to start his recovery journey and get in contact with a professional to try and get help and not go ahead with it. And it just completely blew me away that people would trust me with that story, and to hear other people's stories, either of their own mental health struggles or people they've lost along the way. It just really was humbling that people felt comfortable sharing that with me. And I sincerely hope it will encourage others to speak out about their own experiences, or if they are in that bad place, because as I said earlier, I think starting that conversation is the beginning of a journey. It was for me, and I think it can be for other people as well.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I think you'll helped so many people, and I think it's incredibly courageous that you chose Prime Minister's Questions to speak out. Elliot Colburn, thank you.
Thank you.